Hello, everybody. Edre here, and for anybody new here, I make casual reviews, and they are just my opinion. So take everything I say with a giant grain of salt. That being said, today I'm going to be reviewing the new Shame album, Drunk Tank Pink. A bit of background, like I do with all of my reviews. Shame is a solid post-punk group that put out a solid album, Songs of Praise, back in 2018. And in many ways, their style is down the same vein as many other artists in sort of this post-punk kind of wave of bands like Idols. And so far, I've enjoyed their material quite a bit. I've had very little major complaints, and so far I've been relatively satisfied. So going into this album, I was relatively optimistic. You know what? Let's just get straight into the review. Musically, Drunk Tank Pink seems a bit darker on the surface than their previous album, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's good that they are exploring an even darker sound. I always have loved it when post-punk takes on a darker sound. That's always something I appreciate quite a bit. Even though it is down a similar stylistic path, it's not like all of a sudden they sound like a goth band. They still sound like Shame. But yeah, the opening track, Alphabet, is really a solid opening track to me. It really sets the tone of the album. It really makes it clear what you're getting into right off the bat. Overall, perfect way to introduce this album, I think, to the listener. The track Born in Luton, I think, might just be my favorite song on the album, and one of my favorite songs I have actually heard from Shame in general. It has an excellent drum groove on it, before transitioning into a bit of a slower, cleaner, more punky ballad section, which really keeps the listener interested, because oftentimes on a lot of these style of albums and more punk-related genres, I don't usually hear that sort of change-up as much, and yet they do it while still keeping that post-punk, raw, gritty energy. It might just be, in my opinion, their best song. In general, I think the album itself throughout, in songs like, Born in Luton greatly represent this, is a really solid music album. I mean, what I mean is that the actual musicality, the instrumentation, the talent on this album, I think is really strong, and they definitely prove to be one of the most talented post-punk bands out there right now. And this translates well on the single Water in the Well, one of, I think, the group's most solid singles to date. And towards the later half of this LP, you get a bit more shorter, a bit more straight to the point, more punk-friendly songs, and one of the great examples there is Harsh Degrees. It is one of the most solid, more traditional punk songs on this album. It gets the point across, the energy is there. Overall, it kept me interested, and I think the fact that it is a relatively shorter length definitely helps it, because it doesn't go on too long, and it's just the right length. Though I enjoy much of this album, and I think that it is a sound of a band moving more and more in the right direction, I unfortunately don't feel like in the grand scheme of the genre, of the new wave, of post-punk bands, unfortunately, I don't think they are doing anything super standout to make them really be above and beyond their contemporaries. Unfortunately, I still think bands like Idols are still pushing the boundaries of the genre a little more, and I have to give bands like Idols a bit more credit. That being said, I think it is a solid post-punk album without a doubt. I think that for an average listener, it might not leave the impact, it might not leave as big of an impact on me or as a random listener of post-punk and punk in general as a band like I said, Idols would, or the Chats might. But I do think, needless to say, it is a solid album. And I think in comparison to Songs of Praise, it is just as good, if not a little bit better. I enjoy it a lot. I think it's arguably their best album so far. It just didn't blow me away that much. However, I do think that the instrumentation was great. The songs themselves were great. And overall, it's everything I would have wanted on a follow-up album. And also everything I would just want in a good, solid punk album. Production-wise, one of the things that really stood out to me with the production is that it's produced by James Ford, who, if you don't know, produced Depeche Mode's wonderful 2017 album Spirit. For those who don't know, I really enjoy Depeche Mode quite a bit. They are my personal favorite group, and I think almost everything they do turns out relatively good. And I think James Ford really shows a lot of versatility, being able to produce post-punk and bands like Depeche Mode, which are very different from each other. I think that picking him was a great choice, because I think he's one of the best producers out there currently. Overall, I think Shame continues to be on the forefront of the modern post-punk movement. Even if I think they might not be as impactful and groundbreaking as other acts, they are without a doubt extremely talented and are on top of their game. And I got a lot of general enjoyment. There's very little to really say. There's not many major complaints. There's just mainly a lack of major compliments. Overall, this is definitely an album I will be returning to. So, rating time. What do I rate this album? At the end of the day, Shame's second album, Drunk Tank Pink, I believe, is a very nice, raw, and punky 7 out of 10. For anybody that doesn't know my reviews, you need to know anything above a 5 is good, anything below a 5 is negative. So a 7 is positive. I genuinely did enjoy this album. It may not have been my favorite release of post-punk of all time, but it definitely shows the band Shame moving in the right direction, and I couldn't be any more happy. I guess I could, but I really enjoyed it. I recommend everybody check it out, especially if you're into some post-punk and some punk in general. Shame really does a great job on this album. They definitely show off their musical talent and their ability to make the album flow nicely. Overall, the songs are very good. But yeah, at the end of the day, relatively good album. Shame, Drunk Tank Pink, 7 out of 10. See you next time.